Hello, Internet. It's Skorkowski, and today we're going to discuss a possible alternative to one of the big dilemmas for game masters, and that is secret dice rolls. Now, what I mean by that is that in tabletop RPGs, there are times when a player character needs to make a skill roll, but the game master might not want the player of that character to immediately know the outcome of that roll, such as a hide check. If the character is in the room and they hear footsteps coming from up the hallway and the player goes, "Oh, I'm going to hide," and the game master asks them to make a skill roll, the player is going to instantly know before that person enters the room whether their character was successful in that roll and whether they're hiding like a ninja or whether they're standing in the corner with the lampshade on their head like a complete idiot. That destroys that moment of tension as the person enters the room and now the player is sitting there with their fingers crossed, hoping that their roll was good enough that they're not going to get caught. The same goes for perception checks. A character walks out of a building, the game master calls for a perception check or awareness or spot or whatever you call it in your own game, and the players roll it, and if they're successful, they're going to see the sniper rifle peeking out of the window across the street. But if they fail that roll, the players still know that there is something out there, even if their characters have no idea there is, because the players were asked to make a skill roll. And now if they do take that time to be a little bit paranoid and they want to double check and they want to be extra sure because, it just seems a little too quiet, it's almost impossible for a player to pull that off and not come across that they're metagaming and using out-of-character knowledge in order to try to get a second roll out of it because they want to be double sure. Now, if a game master was to roll that same perception check for them and the players have no idea if they were successful or not and whether it really is, outside the building clear of snipers or not, then it does come across a little bit easier for a player to go, you know what, it's just a little too quiet. I want to double check and I want to be extra sure. That comes across more as good role playing versus just metagaming as someone that's trying to take advantage of the system to milk a second roll. So even if a player does the exact same thing as how they respond being paranoid, how we perceive them is going to be altered because of whether we know whether their player knows or not, whether they were successful or not. And that can cause some players who might actually be that paranoid to go, no, I'm not going to double check because I don't want people to think that I'm metagaming. But there are also some that will metagame because they just try to take advantage of the system. But this brings up the big debate. Should a game master make those rolls for the players? In some ways, that is a great way to do it. It keeps everyone honest. It adds to better drama because nobody knows if it was successful or not. But at the same time, the players are the ones that should be making all their skill checks for them. After all, they are their characters and they are the players of those characters. And from a personal opinion, if a bad skill roll is going to cause problems for a player character, I want the player to be the one that fails that skill roll. I don't want them to have something bad happen because I made their skill roll as a game master and I rolled a failure for them. But there's really just the two approaches to it. Player rolls it or game master rolls it. And these things have been debated for years and they're probably going to be debated for the rest of time that we've got role-playing games. So for today's Game Master Toolbox, I want to offer a third option in this two-option system. This is a method that allows the players to roll the skill checks but not know the result of those skill checks or even know when those skill checks are going to be called for, meaning that nothing is going to tip them off that a skill check was required, and it can add to a little bit more drama and a lot more fun. Now, I didn't come up with this myself. This isn't my idea. I got this from the Cyberpunk 2020 Player's Handbook as an optional rule for awareness checks. But this can be applied to any other role-playing game that does have any sort of roles that the Game Master would want to keep secret. Now, how this works is at the start of each session, the Game Master just takes a piece of paper and draws a quick, simple chart on it. Along one side, they list the characters. Then they place numbers across the top. For this example, I'm going to use 10, but you can use more or less just depending on how many of these skill checks you're expecting to have during the session. But I do recommend that you make it a number that's the same as one of the dice that you have. So 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, probably not 20, but you could do 20. Then the players roll the skill checks at the beginning of the session. Game masters then write down the results on the chart next to that character's name. And whether it be the total number of what the skill roll came to with all of the characters, modifiers and pluses and abilities and that sort of thing, or in games like Call of Cthulhu, you just kind of note what level of success, whether it's a failure, regular, hard, extreme, etc. Then the game master rolls a die for however many columns they have, and let's say they got a 5 here. Now when the Game Master needs a perception check, they just consult the list of the pre-rolled perception checks, starting with the 5th one. And then the next time that they need a perception check, they go with the 6th and the 7th and the 8th, etc., etc. So for this system, the player is the one that made the skill rolls, and the Game Master does honor the rolls that the player made. However, the player doesn't necessarily know when those skill rolls are going to be used. All they know is that at some point, the GM is going to tell them whether their player character sees something, or if they don't see something, the player might not have any idea that there was a skill check that was needed or not. In cases where you have bonus dice in your game, such as advantage or disadvantage, Game Master just simply takes the 2 results in order and go with the highest or the lowest, depending whether it was a bonus die or a penalty die. Whenever I do these charts, I just write it all down on a big Post-it note like this, then just slap the Post-it note up on the back of my Game Master screen or somewhere where I can find it and see it very easily and very clearly. Now, one problem with this system can happen if a Game Master overuses it, meaning that there could be several skills that the GM wants to keep secret as far as the results, hide, listen, find traps, some sort of, psychology or human perception, to tell if people are lying to them or not. And the list can go on and on depending on what sort of game system you're running and what type of game you're running, whether it is going to be a lot of secretiveness to it. And the problem is that if the Game Master makes a chart for every single skill that they want to do this for, then that means that every game opens with them demanding dozens of rolls for all of the players, and that becomes really tedious for absolutely everyone involved. And now the Game Master has to keep track of all these different charts, which is a lot of paperwork and sucks. So I strongly encourage you that if you do decide to try this system, limit yourself to 1, maybe 2 skills that you use it for, but no more than that, because it can become a bit tiresome for everyone involved if you try to do this for too many. Another thing you should really consider is still allowing the players to make rolls for certain skill checks during the session. I leave it up to your judgment as to when you think the best time to consult the chart versus have the player roll it is. It's a personal rule of thumb. If the player is asking for that, I am more inclined to just let the player roll it. But if the player has no idea that there is something that they're supposed to see, then that's when I would actually consult the chart. And they're never going to know that I was actually checking to see if they spotted something or not. Now they don't know if they missed something. You just decide what is best for the drama and how well everything can work in your group, and just leave it up to your judgment as the GM. Now, this is a system that I've used many times through different types of games over the years, but I don't always use it. For example, in our current game of Call of Cthulhu, I don't use this system at all. I just let the players roll everything for it. However, if we were to change systems, or we're going to change entirely how our game is going to work, I would very quickly pick this up and adopt this as the new method that I want to try for this game. It just doesn't work in every game, and it's really up to you to decide when you think you want to use it, but it isn't a catch-all method, or at least shouldn't be a catch-all method. Now, it's something that I do know works, and it's something that I knew works very well as an effective tool. So for any game masters out there who have been debating whether they should always allow the players to roll a skill check or whether they should roll some in secret behind the screen, I offer this to you as a good alternative that maybe you should try out and see if this works well for you. Well, that's it for this episode. Pretty short and sweet. Hopefully some game masters out there saw this and can find this useful as something that can improve the fun in their game. But until next time, gamers, you have a great day.